Hey everyone, and welcome to another Sounds Profitable Product Deep Dive. I am so excited to introduce you to Amelia Coomber, the Chief Growth Officer at Podscribe, a fan favorite of our Deep Dive series. Amelia, welcome to the Deep Dives.
Hey, Bryan, thanks. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you here because Podscribe was actually our first deep dive ever when we started. And Pete has been a big fan of continuing to work with us here because you guys have been innovating on so many new things over the years and even the quarters on it. And so this year, we're going to kick things off with doing one per quarter. And I'm so excited to meet another face of Podscribe because Podscribe continues to grow.
We're growing a lot, and these are so awesome for us because a lot of the things that we talk about, we actually end up building. So, sounds profitable is really, really important for us, and building products that actually provide value to podcast advertisers.
Well, we've had a chance to talk a little bit about Podscribe in the past, but it's been a bit since the last deep dive. So I know you wanted to go through some things a little bit overall about Podscribe and then dig into some new feature enhancements. So I'm going to turn this over to you to tell us a little bit about yourself and about Podscribe.
Sounds great. Awesome. Well, I have been with Podscribe for a little over 3 years. I come from a performance marketing background. I've run and managed podcast advertising. And I, as most podcast advertisers do, noticed a lot of things that just were outdated or were different in the industry compared to other digital marketing channels. And so it's been really, really great to work with Pete because we're actually building products that solve problems that, performance marketers, growth marketers like me actually experience. So at a very high level, Podscribe is a podcast advertising analytics platform. And we do 3 things really, really well. That's reporting, verification, and attribution. All of those things absolutely fundamental to helping measure and scale podcast advertising. And that's sort of like our bread and butter. So I'm going to dive into some of those. We'll talk a little bit more about the industry as a whole. But at a high level, Podscribe is used by some of the largest spenders in the industry, whether it's Manscaped, Helix, BetterHelp. We've helped these brands actually scale their podcast advertising because of the solutions, the analytics, the data that we're able to provide them in a really, really easy and digestible manner, which is, again, as you know, Bryan, pretty unique to the industry.
I'd say so.
So let's first talk about reporting. So if you've ever bought podcast ads, you know firsthand that the state of podcast reporting is a little outdated, to say the least. Again, as a performance marketer with a performance marketing background in media buying, we have a standard that we sort of expect analytics and data to be presented to us. But for podcast advertising, there's no Google ads or, dashboard. There's no Facebook ad manager. Instead, to get your data, not only do you have to request it from the show, but you get it in this really, really less than awesome CSV file with all of the impressions, with all of the data that you've requested. And it's really, really time consuming. It's frustrating. And it's a lot of manual work for these advertisers to take all of these CSVs, aggregate the data, and then just try to answer the most basic questions. What was the ROI of all of our podcast initiatives? What show performed better? What was the most recent ad? All of those things, really fundamental and easy questions, are really difficult with the current state of podcast advertising. And we wanted to change that. So at a really high level, when it comes to Podscribe reporting, we are a automated, real-time, easy-to-use, centralized dashboard that has all of the data and the analytics in one place for podcast advertising. Whether you want to look at performance by show, ad, actual episode, all of those things are baked into how we report. And so really, it's just giving advertisers a one-stop place to see all of that data. We offer attribution, which is another component. We'll dive into it. But really, the reporting side is just how can we stop this manual emailing back and forth process and get all that data into one place so that it's easy for advertisers to see how their campaigns are performing, but also just get visibility into what's going on.
And I think, for the people who've seen the other deep dives, which I highly recommend going back and looking at, what's neat about this is that the platform, and I'm excited to show all of you it because I've gotten a sneak peek of it, has had quite the facelift and is a great tool for centralizing all of this. But Podscribe still at its core seems to be focusing heavily on making sure that if you want your data in a specific way, exported out to you for you to ingest or pushed out to a certain tool that you already use, maybe it's Google Sheets, maybe it's your own proprietary thing, that's still a very core function of this, which is attractive because those examples that Amelia brought up here are silos, right? Google Ads is for Google Ads, Facebook Ad Manager is for Facebook ads. All of these solutions are for silos. And while podcasting is open, that doesn't mean that we can't start standardizing this. And what's been always appealing to me about Podscribe is their mindset about standardizing these things, making some things open source, and really focusing on what we should be looking at and presenting it in a really attractive way.
Hit the nail on the head. Absolutely. And I wanted to touch on that Google Sheets thing that you mentioned too, because that's another really, really big aspect of what we do. Again, really at the end of the day, whether it's a dashboard or a Google Sheet, all we want to do is help brands get that data in one place so that they can look at it cohesively. And so we work with a lot of clients who are like, we don't want to learn another dashboard. We don't have to get familiar with some other type of UX. We have a campaign tracking sheet. And can you just import all of this data automatically into that sheet? And so we do that. It's a two-way automated integration. They drop all of their campaigns and their shows just when they're going to go live, and then we automatically drop all of that data in there. So it's easy. And so not only do they have a dashboard that they can use and they can show leadership if they want, but we're also building solutions, and we have solutions available for if they already are doing things a certain way, we can still get you all of that aggregated data in one place. That's sort of just the name of the game when it comes to
I want to just take a topical second on that one, because these are quarterly. A bunch of us just came back from Podcast Movement and South by Southwest, and there's been such a focus on measurement lately. And people are saying that podcasting is losing the battle to win advertising dollars because of measurement. And let me tell you that is the abbreviated version of the sentence. It does not mean that there's not measurement in podcasting, because we do run circles around other channels. Absolutely. What it means is how they examine and utilize that measurement. If that measurement is in yet another dashboard only, that they have to learn more lingo and all of that, that is not attractive to someone who's trying to manage spend during not a recession, but like a pullback a little bit on ad spend. When that data is in exactly their tool, exactly how they want to see it compared to their other mediums, performance marketers and brand marketers are able to see the success of podcasting side by side with their other channels. That is something that we need to solve for as an industry. So having the mindset to build such a cool core platform, but the comfort and knowing that the place your data is going to land the best is wherever your client wants to see it. That is the mindset that podcasting has to bring to every aspect of the industry.
I totally agree. Again, it's just about getting all of that data in one place, and whatever that place is for that advertiser, we want to do it. And I think, again, you hit the nail on the head, because so many, I think it's like 70% of first-time podcast advertisers churn. And that just should not be the case, because podcast advertising, it drives incremental value and incremental customers, especially in the world of privacy and data changes and everything that's going on. So again, this is just another core component of helping unlock the power of what podcast advertising can bring by allowing you to actually have it and digest all of its results in an easy, to sort of see manner.
Love it.
Amazing. All right, let's go to the second big piece, verification. And Bryan, you are definitely one of those people that talks about verification a lot. And I think you said it best yourself. It starts with air checks. So everything from Podscribe it starts out at the base level as an air checks. We have an incredibly robust system that transcribes and automatically identifies ads in episodes and shows. And so that's the core of what Podscribe does. And then we actually apply around 12 different automated verification flags on top to help brands ensure that what they are paying for is what they're getting. Those flags can range from the ad never ran, the placement was wrong, I paid for a mid-roll, I got a pre-roll, my ad ran right after a competitor's ad, the promo or URL was incorrect. All of those things incredibly important, and we see this data in and every day, and it's a crazy number, but 18% of ads that go live have one of these errors. And verification has definitely become sort of a hot topic as of recently. One of the most interesting things from our perspective is that verification in our mind is not a nice to have. It's not okay, great, I have this extra feature. Verification when it comes to podcast advertising is absolutely foundational. It's absolutely crucial. And I'll actually tell you a story about one of our clients, which sort of just summarizes this. So we're still working with this brand. We started working with them a couple years ago. And we were just talking with them about all things podcast advertising. And they basically said to us, listen, we've tested out the channel. We spent about $60,000 on one of the shows that we all know. It was supposed to be about 3 ads over the course of a month. And they told us that it basically resulted in nothing. They didn't see any form of ROI. why the ad just didn't work. And they were like, hey, we love what Podscribe is doing, but frankly, we've just determined podcast advertising is not a channel for us. And so what did we do? We went and we went back and found all of their ads that they were ran for that show. And we applied our automated flags on them. We did all of the transcription. And it turns out, Bryan, that those 3 ads literally included the wrong URL. They missed an entire word of their brand name in that URL, and they had no idea about it. They had run this ad 3 months ago at that time, and they had told us podcast advertising just work. Turns out it was because the ad was incorrect. And so this is what can happen, is that how can you possibly measure or assess an ROI on something if you don't have confidence that it was ran correctly? So again, in our minds, verification is an absolute must-have. It's absolutely fundamental, especially in podcast advertising, because there isn't a visual way to look at this. And the only way to check your ad ran correctly without something like Podscribe is by actually listening to it. And come on, how many brands are actually listening to every single ad that was ran? So this is really, really critical. And in fact, if you do attribution with us, this comes like free of charge because it's that critical. So really, really important here. Again, independent third party, all based on air checks, and we help these brands scale with confidence.
It's my favorite thing. And it always sounds bad, right? Like, we're going to catch you running bad ads. I don't think anybody believes that a publisher wants an ad to fail. Like, no matter how people believe that the relationship between podcasters and advertisers, right? And like, some of them are great about it, and some of them make it sound like, this is where we get paid, and push it off there. It's beneficial for everybody to get what they paid for and feel good about it. This tool, the verification thing, you're talking about 3 months after the fact. And that's rough because of the fact that we're talking about how delayed reporting can be when the buyer doesn't have their own solution installed in there. Verification, the idea is that you catch it after the first mistake, because you don't want to do a make good for $1 million campaign. You want to catch it in the first $10,000 worth of errors. You want to catch that issue as soon as you can and let them know to fix it so that there's no more errors, because nobody wants a make good. They don't. Like, it doesn't help to have an ad that sends somebody to the wrong URL and then run another series of ads for another month that could send people to the right URL. You burnt something there. It's not the first time you're with that show anymore. There's loss. So the faster we resolve it, the more real time we're able to monitor these things. That's a big deal. Now, programmatic and all these run of network stuff do complicate these things. But what I liked that you guys have shown me in the past is how many times you're downloading these shows. That's really powerful, because it's not just one download. It's not everything's baked in. But when people are buying significant share of voice, which is really the intention for a tool like this, when you're buying programmatically, we don't have that covered yet as an industry. We are working towards things like that. But when you're buying share of voice, which is when you care about these things, this is table stakes. And I love that you include it for free with attribution, because I'm the medicine type of guy. I would charge for this and include everything else for free, because this, to me, this is what saves a company.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally agree. And I think, again, you hit on a really important point, which is like, we're not, especially for, shows and networks and publishers and stuff, like this can at a glance be, looked at as something that they don't want, or, that it's, we don't, obviously like make goods aren't a good thing. The difference is, and this is the sort of shift we're seeing because we work with a lot of publishers and networks, is they actually want to offer this level of transparency. Because to what you said, Bryan, it's if they can catch the make good before the brand catches that, they have a better chance of working longer together. That, the LTV of the actual brand running podcast ads on that show is going to be much longer. So it's actually a benefit. And obviously this is critical for brands to make sure they know what they're getting. But we're really seeing a shift in the perspective around this when it comes to shows, publishers, and networks, because they want to offer this and they want to make sure that they're providing what, is important to the brands.
Well, losing $400,000 in the example there of make good doesn't mean that the advertiser got an additional $400,000 because there was something wrong with the first one. So that's not great, but it means that the publisher lost $400,000 worth of inventory. Then they have to also give another $400,000 worth of inventory. Like, that's not great. This is a tool, honestly, that's to make an advertiser comfortable, but this is defensive for the publisher. This helps a publisher not lose money.
Yep. No, absolutely. Absolutely. So again, really, really important on both sides. But automated, just right there. And again, it's crazy how many ads actually have errors. And so again, these publishers and these networks have really, really liked solutions like this because they're able to catch it, and they want to provide the best service to these brands and advertisers. So overall, it's really important. And again, it's not a nice to have. It's absolutely foundational.
I agree.
Amazing. All right. And attribution, again, you had mentioned this, but attribution is absolutely the hottest topic going on right now in podcast advertising. Podscribe, very, very unique in terms of what we provide when it comes to attribution. So 100% automated. Obviously, we just talked about reporting. All of that's automated. The difference between Podscribe and some of these other attribution providers, when I say automated, is that anything else other than Podscribe, if you want an attribution provider to track your campaigns, you still have to send them a CSV of what show, when that episode is supposed to drop, where the ad's going to be. And as you probably know, Bryan, and everybody else in the industry knows, sometimes the episodes don't go live exactly when they say they are. Sometimes they push them back for whatever reason. So this causes a huge headache because basically if the ad didn't launch exactly in the place at the exact time that CSV file told the attribution provider it was going to, then they can't track that data. And that's why we're different, because it's all based on air checks. We don't need any of this data, but this having to upload and update all of this data so that the attribution provider can actually track it. It sounds like, okay, maybe every once in a while it'll happen and it just takes me another 5 minutes. We talk to all these brands and it is a huge headache for them because they're not just running one ad. They're not just working with one show. They're probably working with tens, if not 50. And so having to do this every time, going into your dashboard and not seeing results and wondering why, or having to troubleshoot that, is really, really frustrating and manual. So with Podscribe, you never ever have to upload another CSV again. We're 100% automated, real time. With a lot of these other attribution providers, they're going to get data and it's going to be a couple days after. Within 2 hours of that ad going live, you will start seeing data populate into your dashboard or your Google Sheet. Again, we're independent. We're a third party. There's no bias. It's in one centralized dashboard. One of the cooler things, especially being a performance marketer, is that I can dive into attribution and measurement at not only a show and an episode level, but also at an ad creative level, which is really, really cool because, we believe that ad creative is critical to how a campaign or a show is going to perform. And then we can track any KPI, whether it's CAC, conversions, ROAS, spend, verified impressions. We can do custom conversions. We can do app installs. We can do smart promos. So really, the world is your oyster. Whatever company, sort of monitors or has set as their KPIs, we can build that into this. So it's absolutely game changing.
Well, I like, real quick on that, what I like about that on the attribution side of it is that a lot of what you're talking about with the like prefix, right? Like if we're doing a baked in ad, an actual baked in ad, being able to put the prefix live tells you all of the downloads. But if somebody doesn't put the ad in there and they have to go back in and edit it and re-upload it, then the verification aspect of it, the air check is going to be able to see that gap there. So you're not just getting every time your pixel fired, you're getting when did they see the ad. Same thing with understanding verification and the ad for dynamic ad insertion, being able to see when the first impression went live versus when the episode went live. Being able to see if it went out on like when the episode dropped or an hour or a day or a week later than that, understanding and just associating it to what you buy does make it tighter analytics on that. I think that that's really smart there. So you're able to do, I believe, prefix URL and then an impression URL for both of those. And then because of the verification aspect, especially when you're buying a substantial share of voice on these partners, you're able to confirm whether or not you got what you paid for and the pixel is firing there. So that double-ended side of it is really strong. I loved what you said about the ad creative side. I think so many people don't take that into account. So being able to look at ad creative, not just in like asset A, asset B, asset C, but being able to see the creative breakdown, or being able to find out like, oh, I did announcer ad and they actually ran the wrong creative on the wrong week, and all these different things. We tend to throw away an entire show with the results of a campaign. If a show does really well, we stick it on there. But if a show does bad, we don't say like, it was a bad ad read. We say that show doesn't work for this brand. These are the types of things that allow us to really get into the nitty gritty, which again, performance marketer like you are, and like my background, like that's really attractive. That's where podcasting can really shine, because what you can find out is what does and doesn't work. Do I need to buy 100% share of voice? Does it need to be host right? Does it need to be announced right? Can it be funny, male, female voice? What are all the different variables that you can play with?
People and clients have used us for so long with the air checks and the verification and just the reporting in general. But again, attribution has become such a fundamental part of what we are doing. And we're trying to approach it in a way that separates us from some of these other brands by understanding, or some of these other providers, by understanding what those problems are, that some of the, the pain points that other brands are experiencing with these attribution providers. And we're trying to solve for them. So going really great, and totally hear you there, Bryan.
Love it.
Amazing. All right. We won't dive into too many of these core benefits, but again, one of the other unique things that we offer is that we can do attribution internationally. That's all very, very unique. We also do a lot of YouTube and simulcast reporting. We'll touch on that briefly. But again, if you do attribution with us, everything else is included. So the air checks, the reporting, the verification. So really, really great. Here's a sneak peek of what the dashboard looks like. We'll dive into that a little bit more in depth just now. All right. Well, here's the Podscribe dashboard. So I know, Bryan, you've probably seen so many iterations of this. And as you mentioned, it has gotten a serious facelift.
Facelift.
It is clean. It is beautiful. It looks like a dashboard that I expect as a performance marketer. So really, really excited about that. But here we are. This is the overview page. Again, it's a one-stop shop for everything a advertiser or somebody in leadership needs to understand when it comes to how podcast advertising is doing. On the left, you can see we've got blended, or we can dive into individual shows, but you can see all of your high-level metrics. So CAC, ROAS, we can see spend, we can look at what revenue is, total impressions, purchases, all of those things at the click of a button, daily, weekly, monthly, change the date range, all of that super, super easy. So again, it's supposed to be a really, really easy way to take a look at this and just understand at a glance where things are trending from podcast advertising perspective. We can scroll down a little bit. Here you can look at per show. So here's a high level overview of how the shows are performing. So we can see that the top performing show is And This Is Why We Drink. They've generated 518 conversions, over 40K in revenue, $102 CPA. We can expand this. We can see all of the episodes that these ads were run in. All right, we can scroll down. And here we have a high level overview of just how the shows themselves perform. So we're filtering by conversions right now. So we can see that the top performing show is And This Is Why We Drink. They've generated 518 conversions, 40K in revenue, $102 CPA. We can expand that and we can see the individual episodes these ads have run in. Again, we can break down that and actually see the performance. So this, going back to what we were talking about, Bryan, is a really great way to see, well, why did this episode perform better than the airing on the 11th? Well, let's look at the ad creative. Let's see if there was something different going on. Really, really, really helpful. We can also take a look at high level publishers. So we can look at shows, we can look at publishers, which publisher performed the best, which show inside of that publisher. We can look at performance by geo. This is huge.
I would say so. Yeah. I mean, we need more ways to pivot things. Like we keep thinking about shows as an entire entity, but like what happens if they do really well in Canada and Mexico and not in the US? That's not a bad thing.
Exactly.
CPMs and different things work in different ways in different countries. So there's absolutely many different ways that we should be dividing things up.
And that's what, in any other digital marketing channel, that's what you do, right? You don't rule out a channel just after a couple tests. You look at all these individual things. So if we know that Facebook works really well in Canada, then we're going to run, all of our ads in Canada, and maybe we'll do something else for the US. So totally spot on. It just gives you a different way to look at all of this performance rather than just did the show work or not.
And my favorite at the bottom, which is the nerdiest thing, is IP types. And I know you're going to skip over that, but like we cannot sleep on this. This is one of our biggest indicators in podcasting of where the person's listening, whether it's household, cellular, or business. And you have even more information on here. We've barely scratched the surface of that in this industry. The fact that you're showing this data in such granularity is so attractive. The people that are scared of finding out that their advertisers only perform in Mexico, which is only 7% of their total inventory, are not understanding that they are saving themselves 7% of that campaign for the future renewal and not losing 100% of that campaign. You're like, these are ways to prove where you should be able to win a bigger campaign, but there are always ways to show where there is some value in continuing working with with you. That's the value on a publisher side. And on an advertiser side, it's about reach. It's about identifying what does and doesn't work. It's about getting the best price and the best return and the best assets too. And that's what I really like about how you're marrying all of this together, because a lot of the attribution options that we have out there are just pure analytics and reporting and no creative or no verification aspect of it. Marrying the two together is really strong. It gives me that Facebook ad marketplace vibe, a Google ad vibe that really does look on every single thing, that looks at A/B testing and all of that, which I feel like you're leading towards. I feel like that's where this is going to get towards, to really allow for that.
I mean, that's the only way like a channel like this can be. I mean, it is so effective. We've seen that ad spend is growing astronomically, but we have to approach it like all of these other digital marketing channels. And you said it again, spot on. If you're running a Facebook ad, we test background colors. Did blue or yellow? And we won't be able to do it at that granularity for podcast ads, but that's how we should be thinking about these things. And that's how you can actually optimize and continue to improve that performance by looking at things again outside of just an aggregated view. So 100%. We have to go that way.
And visualizing it, how you're visualizing it is really attractive, because when you, like you said, you can't test background colors. Well, I mean, we can test a lot of these things. We can test not the background color, but the background sound or the voice or the inflection points or the words that are used. These are all things that we can test and we can grow into, but it's really important how to visualize it. It's why audio as a social media hasn't caught on, because we hit these points where at a certain point, like, a 22-year-old can't look at that and grasp it. So getting it in numbers, getting it in charts, making it clear, it breaks it down for how people want to learn and how they want to use that data and how they're used to using that data. And that's really what we have to realize. We're a $2 billion industry. We can be a $20 billion industry if we just adhere to other industries.
Absolutely. And we're just, humans are visual people, and so the nature of the medium being audio, again, you have to listen to it. I've worked at companies where I was told to go find the ads and episodes and listen to them. And so, just the nature, again, what Podscribe is built off, which is this transcription and automatic ad identification, which everything else stems from, I think is just so critical, because I can listen to an ad, but if I can actually read it and see what the creative says, and I can compare that to another ad, I mean, it's absolutely where the industry needs to go. And again, it's just how these channels should work and the different levers that you can actually pull to be able to optimize these sorts of things. So yeah, turning the podcast industry into a visual format, so that it fits with like the other ones.
And I hope everybody here gets the excitement that Amelia has here. Me and her go on these manic rides through all of this stuff because we're so passionate about it. Like, this is stuff that we could apply to basically any other industry. And Amelia and I would do very well in any other industry. But podcasting has something that really appeals to us. It appeals to the people at Podscribe, the people at Sounds Profitable, and why we're focused on it here. We have to crack this. And tools like this excite me because they're one more way to translate it to someone. So I'm loving this on the reporting aspect here. There are a few other things you wanted to show us, like deeper into this, right?
Yes. So let's jump into the verification side of things. So this is the campaigns verification tab. Again, all of the date range filtering, all of the criteria, all of that's there, completely customizable. But at a high level up top, here we have the campaign summary. So all of the ads down below, all of the shows, all of the advertisers. And right up here, we can see that out of the $15 million in ad spend, Podscribe matched 7.4 million of that and said, hey, that's completely good to go. It followed all of the criteria for that ad were good. However, 3.6 million of that 15 million was flagged with some sort of error. So over here on the right, you can see these types of issues. So we've got three main sort of verification categories. One is impression issues, two placement issues, and then three is really like the ad creative. So bad promo, incorrect talking points. So we can click on any of these. And then it'll basically pull all of the ads that have been flagged with this sort of error. So wrong geo, we can expand into this. We can see exactly what ad and episode that was found in. We can look at all of the impression data. Let's do something a little bit more interesting. Let's look at bad promo. I'm going to unflag the wrong geo. So again, we'll just drop down into this advertiser and show. These are actually all simulcast, which is really, really interesting. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But we were expecting the promo code H3TV, and instead we found the promo code After Dark. So again, critical errors that can completely skew the performance of this ad or this show in general. And we can flag those both for the brand as well as the publisher so that they can go and fix that. And they can save, as the publisher, save those ad dollars in those placements. And then also for the brand, make sure that they're not trying to measure something that was actually inaccurate. So once again, we've got...
Yeah. Well, and how quickly would I get notified of that? Let's say I'm the publisher and I'm using this tool. This looks like the advertiser view here because it's multiple shows, but this tool works for both publishers and advertisers. If I'm a publisher, how quickly would I get notified of this, and how could I get notified of like a bad placement?
Within 2 hours of that ad going live. We have a bunch of different forms of this. So this is both the advertiser view. We also have views for publishers. It looks really, really similar. So they can, again, see all of their brands and then figure out which ones have errors. But we also send an automated email with all of those. And then we actually quantify, again, how much in make goods they're sort of losing out on. So,
and that's by them setting their estimated CPM for the campaign or that specific line item when the advertiser sets it up, or when the publisher identifies how much their inventory is worth? For how much the value is for the make good and whatnot. How do you calculate that?
Exactly. By understanding what that CPM is. So whether it's, and we get all that data right whether we're working inside of that, Google Sheet that we do two-way integration to, or we're just onboarding this client. We understand all of just the high level, really important stuff. We get that from them. And then, we back into that number. So that's a really, really good way of sort of, again, quantifying it for the brand or the publisher to be like, this is actually how much you're missing out on. And it allows them to, figure out whether getting a make good for that, because there's plenty of errors that don't matter, or that, are sort of, okay, we can probably deal with that. And so it also allows them to figure out like how do we prioritize what we actually go and search for a make good for.
Now you showed me the green and the red in that circle. What is the gray?
The green and the red. The gray is that they're still processing. So that means that there's about $4.8 million in ads that have gone live within the last 60 minutes or so. And so we're still processing and determining whether they have flags or not.
This is fantastic. And that visual that we see there for the impressions over there, that can be exported as a visual component or just as as like
data.
Text?
Yeah, it'll export as like a simple Google Sheets or CSV, and then you just apply, ad chart to it. So super, super easy. You can, of course, like screenshot it and all of that sort of stuff. But yeah, we'll export the actual data. And again, you can look at impressions daily, weekly. So this is another really, really great tool to allow brands to be able to sort of see how things are pacing. We have graphs for frequency, but this one in terms of impressions, you can see, again, this could be really interesting for them. We noticed that like the moment that the ad or the episode dropped, we saw a spike in impressions. We actually saw on the day or 2 days after the episode launched, it was a little lower than the first day, but then it picked back up. So all of these things are really important. And you probably know this better than anybody, Bryan. Obviously, we expect more impressions the day that the ad or the episode launches. That's not always the case. So for your favorite episode or your podcast, Dungeons and Daddies, you're probably the person that the second the episode goes live or a new episode, you're watching it. I watch shows or listen to shows all the time. That's not the case. I'll find a moment when I'm driving to work or something, and then I'll chime in, and then that's 5 days later after the episode launch, that's when I'm going to actually hear the ad and stuff. So just understanding at a show level, at an episode level, how this pacing and these impressions are sort of tracking is just another really important nugget of information to help better optimize.
And what's the bars versus the like wave? What's the blue versus the red, I guess?
So this is an example of what is a simulcast placement, and you beat me to the punch. So we are excited at Podscribe to announce the launch of simulcast combined reporting. You guys are the first people to hear about this. We've got a couple clients that have been testing it for months, and it's an absolute game changer. So, Bryan, long story short, as you know, as people in the industry know, simulcast has become such a popular placement offer for shows and for brands. So, if you don't understand what simulcast is, it's basically a show has a podcast, and they also have a YouTube channel where they might promote the same content or different content. And so now more than ever, these shows are offering the ability to run ads in both of those. So both podcasts as well as that show's YouTube channel. However, up until now, there has not been a way to see that reporting, that analytics on that simulcast in one place together. YouTube doesn't give you access to that. You have to request it, request the impression counts and the and downloads and stuff from your show or from Podscribe before. We actually are the first product to actually combine that reporting. So let's find an ad here as an example. So this Your Mom and Dad, this was a simulcast ad. We found 2 ads. Another really, really cool component of this combined reporting is that we enable better pacing tracking. So if you can see this, I'll zoom in a little bit more. We found 44K total impressions and views. 21K of those came from YouTube. So we're about 44% of the way through total impressions that we're expecting. So 43,000 combined impressions from podcast ad as well as views from YouTube, 40% of the way there. Again, we can look at pacing. So we can see on the 9th, we got 4,000 views and then in total 23, but by the podcast, we got 6. So just, again, the only way to do this before Podscribe was really to go and find that episode in YouTube, just like we used to have to do with podcast ads, and then monitor how those views are, how many of them, take that number, copy and paste it into a spreadsheet and try to come up with an aggregated sort of total. So Podscribe just launched this. It's simulcast combined reporting, and all of that information around how these simulcast placements are performing is in one centralized location, aggregated, so it's easy to actually take value from.
Yeah. Well, so verification makes sense. And I love that's just like table stakes. That was the first thing that you guys did there, because you're taking in the video and then you're able to transcribe it. And from the transcription, you're able to immediately action on that. That's fantastic there. And I see you pulled that transcript up. I love that. How does this work? Because there's no pixels in YouTube. And when it's a baked in or embedded ad in YouTube, I mean, there's no pixels for the ad, not only the impression, the download, but there's also no pixel for the ad. So how are you getting these views, the data from the views? Like, I know that I can make my API access available as a publisher, but are you connecting with every single publisher and doing an API, like you do the overall YouTube API integration and they turn it on to pass it to you? Or do you have another way that you're going about it?
We're just scraping it. So yep, the YouTube's API does not allow for this number or for this data. So we are constantly, we transcribe the actual YouTube ad, we find and locate the ad, typical Podscribe stuff, and then we're actually scraping that views number and we're saving it. So every hour that number will be updated. So we scrape that constantly. We store it in the back end. So that's why we're able to, know on the day of launch, it had this many views and 7 days later, it also had this, rather than sort of overriding that. So we're scraping it, we're pulling it, we're storing that in our back end, and then we're delivering that here.
So what you found is a way to do this where if the person pushes the YouTube video live the middle of the night without telling anybody that there's an ad in it, you don't miss it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, that's sort of the name of the game with Podscribe is you don't have to tell us anything. You got to tell us the show and you got to tell us it's really just the show and tell us that you have ads running it, and we will transcribe and record every single one of those episodes. And so we automatically can identify that. So again, maybe they were supposed to launch this, episode on the 7th and it actually launched on the 8th. With any other attribution provider, you would have had to update that first, figure out that it didn't launch in time, but we are transcribing and recording every single one of these episodes and these ads constantly. So we always have the most up-to-date data, and we'll be the ones to tell you, hey, it didn't run on the 7th, it ran on the 8th. If that's not a big deal, that's totally fine. But here's the data for it. So yes, we found a workaround, and it has been literally saving these advertisers as well as publishers hours of this headache trying to combine this reporting. Again, we talked about those silos. So instead of just going into one place before this, you had to go find YouTube. You got to find the episode, and then you had to continue to update that because these views are going to change over a specific date range. So absolute game changer. And yeah, we're excited to announce it with you, Bryan.
Heck yeah. Well, thank you for announcing that here. So when I set up a show in this platform and I select it, do I have to identify that this is podcast and YouTube as well at the time of setting up my campaign with you?
Yeah, you're
Or
just going to have a filter that says it's a simulcast, or that
awesome.
we can also, again, even if you're not running a simulcast ad, we're still sort of recording and transcribing each of these shows. And if we don't find your ad, then we don't find your ad because it wasn't run. But exactly, it's as simple as, hey, we're running simulcast. We've probably already started recording and transcribing the show on YouTube if this show has it. So super, super easy. We're finding it all.
Do you have a general idea of how many video podcasts on YouTube that you're currently transcribing every month?
It must be hundreds. Yeah, it's definitely not as large as our show's network.
Yeah.
Simulcast in particular is starting to now become a much bigger deal. And brands are for the first time sort of better understanding like how it can contribute to their performance. Because it's really unique, right, Bryan? Like podcast ads, they're all audio and they're great and we know them, right? But YouTube, it's the same host, it's the same, person that these listeners trust and rely on and stuff. But the method of delivery is different, right? So now they get to see the host or they get to see the actions and the excitement when they're talking about them. So it's just starting to become popular. It's becoming very popular, but we are absolutely doing this for hundreds of YouTube shows, and more podcast shows in general are starting to expand into YouTube. So we're going to be working with them before they might even have all their placements filled.
And just to highlight for everybody, the way the model works with Podscribe is really around the fact that they're tracking the top podcasts or the most bought podcasts. But as a partner comes on board, they're going to track whatever's in your campaign, right? There's the difference between something that becomes so common that they track it just on their own and something that they track because you're buying it. But this technology works the same. You identify where the show is on video or podcast, and then you're downloading at time of release, several other times during that release window, transcribing it, matching it all together. This is great. And I really do want to highlight what you're saying here. Like, this is the first time I'm seeing it overlapped in one place. And that's really valuable. Now, look, long term, I'm not convinced that YouTube and podcasts should be sold for the same dollar amount blended. I think we're going to look back on it like somebody trying to sell like billboards and podcasting together. But today it works, and it works very well. And people are having a lot of success with it. We're just focusing sometimes on the wrong things. We're focusing on things sometimes that sound great in an ideal scenario. And I like so much here that you're not asking for the publisher to give API access for them to get the most robust YouTube data. You're saying, what do I get that allows everybody in the path to mess up, but me still not to be able to mess up? And that's critical. That's how we grow, because that first step says, oh, it's worth it to give you unique API access. That's how we prove that it's worth to do more, by proving we can do a ton with less, which is pretty much a core tenet of podcasting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I totally agree with you. I think it's just everything's going to shift in general. But for now, it's another opportunity for these shows and networks to not only hit a different audience, but to also, fill up placements and deliver ads. And I've watched so many YouTube ads that are very similar to their, simulcast podcast ad, sort of counterparts. And it's very interesting to, again, just hear the podcast ad and then watch the YouTube video. And for some people, it just clicks a little differently. So I think it's all going to shift. But right now, this is a solution that came directly from pain points that we have talked with hundreds of advertisers and publishers and networks around. So we're really, really excited to launch this. And again, it's going to remove hours of manual headaches to be able to update this and track it.
Yeah.
Amazing.
This is fantastic. Thank you for announcing this here. This is awesome.
Cool. Well, I mean, I think that just about summarizes everything, Bryan. Again, verification, really, really great. Lots of different flags here. The goal is transparency, the attribution part of it, really, really unique to Podscribe in general. And we're always updating this. But again, at the end of the day, our goal is to really help launch, this podcast advertising industry into what it can be and what we all know. And as we've seen it growing, and we want to turn it into something that's, has a much lower churn rate, and actually shows the value, because podcast advertising in general is one of those incremental channels. It can unlock new audiences. I've seen it firsthand drive growth for brands that I've worked for, and I think that it oftentimes is not getting the credit it deserves, and so we just want to be part of that solution.
And I think you are. I think you're coming at this from a service first mindset. You built a product around a service. You've really advanced it quite a bit. I'm very much impressed with it. The UI looks astoundingly better. Please go back to the older deep dives. It's come a long way in a short period of time. So seriously, thank you for being such a big part of podcasting. Podscribe has really pushed the envelope and pushed what people should expect out of working in podcasting and made some of these things table stakes. And so your inclusion of YouTube here, I'm not saying that I want everybody to copy this, but I kind of am saying that you've done something and kind of held everybody to task. The next step forward is for all of these things to be normalized so that we can expect them everywhere, so that when we go to a buyer and we say buy podcasting, they understand what it means. So thank you for leading from the front with these analytics and putting them all together like this.
Of course, I think it takes manic, passionate people like us, Bryan, to actually do that.
I agree. Well, everyone, the Podscribe is going to be back for 2 or 3 more product deep dives throughout the year. And I'm really excited because we're going to dig into a little bit more granular detail with some additional things that they've got going on this year. But it's very important to me to highlight that your specific needs are something that the Podscribe team wants to talk about directly. So please reach out to Amelia and Pete, the whole team there, but get a direct demo, walk through this with them, and make sure that you understand all of the aspects that this can work well for you, because I think that this is a fantastic tool, and I'm positive you'll find value in it too.
Absolutely. And we wanted to let you know one other thing. We have recently stopped offering free month trials just because we're getting too many brands at a time. But we did want to offer specifically for the Sounds Profitable people listening. If you reach out to any of us and mention Sounds Profitable, we will give a whole free month of verification, attribution, air checks, all of that. So if you're interested, definitely mention Sounds Profitable. And we want to offer that specifically to your listeners, Bryan.
That means the world to me. Thank you so much. And please take them up on it. And we'll see you back here soon.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.